Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. We get into our big stories now as we start with throwing the spotlight on our economy. Now, this morning, we're going to be talking on how much Ghana actually received as financial support in the year 2020. We'll look at all sources, foreign, and also extend the analysis to 2021, the spillover into 2021, since similar grants and support poured into Ghana that year too, into our coffers. We're going to use government's own accounting data to make people understand this, to give you a proper breakdown of what exactly has happened. Our guests, Dr. John Kumah, Deputy Finance Minister. He joins the conversation. We also have Professor Lord Mensah, Finance Lecturer, University of Ghana Business School, and Dr. Patrick Assuming, Economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Gentlemen, let me say a very good morning to you. Do we have Dr. Assuming? Okay, so I see you there. Dr. Assuming, a very good morning to you, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, and good morning to viewers.
Right. Do we have John Kumah with us? Okay, so we'll also be joined by Professor Lord Mensah, Finance Lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. So let's get into some of the data. Recently, for example, country representative of the World Bank, Mr. Laporte, was telling us that the World Bank had actually given us some $430 million, contrary to what we had heard earlier, about $100 million initially to our country in its bid to fight COVID-19. So looking at so far the sources that we've come up with from the World Bank, from the IMF, and other donor groupings, you would realize that we have got quite a chunk of money, some in dollars, others in cedis. When you look at the trajectory, and I'll be walking you through some of the figures shortly, but what generally do you make of this, Dr. Assuming?
Well, so it's the numbers obviously show that we received substantial amount of support from foreign partners. I think the numbers, as in the mid-year budget for 2021, show that we have received just under 26 billion Ghana cedis.
Right.
I think that's quite substantial. So, but at the same time, it also pales in comparison with what government was planning to spend under the Ghana Cares program. So, in some sense, that can also explain why we still have the gap that we have. But there's no two ways about it. I think over a period of a year or two, that substantial amount of revenue to be injected into the economy.
So looking at these inflows, we are looking at some 19.30 billion Ghana cedis. You spoke about the close to 26, but the breakdown from 2020, let's just take a look at that. The IMF accounting for 5.85 billion thereabouts, the World Bank with a bit over 1 billion, the European Union with a little less than, or a little over 500 million, ADB, African Development Bank as well, almost 500. The Bank of Ghana itself, when it comes to the local elements from which we've been borrowing, just about 10 billion. And of course, the Government of Ghana Contingency Fund also contributing a little over 1 billion. Now, some stretch it even further. Are you surprised in any way that on the back of the pandemic in 2020, we could amass all these sums of money? I mean, putting it into perspective, you look at our budgets over the last 2 years, let's say even 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022, and we're hovering around 100 billion Ghana cedis. So to get close to 20 billion or more on the back of COVID-19 is very substantial, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It's very substantial, but I think we also have to understand that in the COVID, especially in 2020, a lot of economic activity shut down, so the government couldn't raise as much revenue as it usually would. So while this is substantial, I think if you look at also the fact that government needed to do a lot more social interventions in the period of the COVID, so you really should not look at just the inflows, look at what was happening on the domestic front. And we have to understand that all these additional inflows were given because our international partners understood that in the era of COVID, the economy wouldn't work the way it normally do. And for instance, government wouldn't collect as much revenue. And then also additional expenditures were made. I think the bigger one would be probably the COVID-19 vaccines that we needed to procure and the other forms of other equipment and supplies we needed to deal with the COVID. So in that sense, yes, it doesn't change the fact that it's a huge amount of inflows that the economy has received. But again, you have to balance it in terms of how much we couldn't raise domestically that we normally would.
There was a time when we're talking about, how much exactly government had spent, and that has become topical because from time to time we're told of some figures are put out there in terms of our expenditure on the back of COVID-19. What we've not been able to do is to fully paint a picture of how much of a dent COVID-19 has made on our economy, so we can gauge it and say this is actually what impact it has had on our economy negatively, of course. But any surprises? I remember some time back we put out some figures concerning government spending about 1.7 billion, on COVID, and there was a pushback. In fact, it was more, about 17 billion, 19 billion thereabouts. And the pushback was that no, they had spent far less than that in actuality. So the point then is looking at what we have done with those funds, all of these funds that have accrued. Yes, our taxes, we overshot our target in 2021. But in 2020, of course, we had some shortfalls. But if you consider all that we've got versus what we've done with them, do you feel we have used these sums of money judiciously, Dr. Esuming?
Well, I think one of the issues is that I'm not sure that every single thing that we spend, the details have been completely made available for the Ghanaian public to be able to interrogate the numbers. So the other thing we also need to understand is that there's some fluidity in the rate at which the funds come in. I mean, all these funds don't come in a particular quarter or in a particular month. They spread over a period of time. In terms of how judiciously we've used the money, I think, it's the onus is on the government to be a little bit more transparent with the COVID expenditure than it has been at the moment. You notice that in Parliament, there's been an attempt to get the government to give a little bit more detail about exactly what has gone in. But, in terms of what we have spent and where we are now, yes, on the broader side, we see that the economy is growing much faster than it was before in 2020. But we also see that where the social interventions were supposed to pushing Ghanaians don't seem to have happened much. The Ghana Statistical Service has been releasing some reports on the COVID impact. The most recent one has been households who, about at least a third of them, report that their incomes have been recovered from the pre-COVID era. And then we also see numbers about, close to 800,000 people who have lost their jobs in the COVID period. And all of these have not been recovered by the economy. So even though on the broader side, on the macro side, it appears that the GDP has recovered, but it's obvious that in terms of translation into the lives of ordinary Ghanaians, we haven't seen the improvement that we would have expected.
In terms of impact on the lives of ordinary Ghanaians, as Dr. Esuming says, we've not seen maybe the sort of results we would have wanted. We're also joined by John Kumar, who speaks on matters bordering on the economy. Honorable Kumar, thank you for joining the conversation, sir.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning to your viewers and listeners, too.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure having you. Of course, he is a Deputy Finance Minister as well. Let me just find out from you. One thing I feel we've not been able to do fully, as Dr. Esuming points out, is talk about the fact of all the expenditure up to date that we've had on the back of COVID-19 and put that side by side with the inflows that we have had. But as of now, though we are focusing on 2020, as of now, if I asked you, Honorable Kumar, to tell me how much have we got in total in our kitty on the back of COVID-19 from different institutions, and how much of it have we expended? What would you say in the most simple terms, explaining it to Ghanaians?
Yes, this was provided in the 2021 budget. So I'm surprised people say they haven't seen it.
You know why I put it that way, even before you go on. These same figures that we are talking of, they've been contested from different sources. You remember, I mean, if it's been in the media space where government says it has spent this, and people have also made not inquiries, but have said that it couldn't possibly be on the back of even the utilities that were given for free. So that is the backdrop for my question.
Yes, but Ben, if I contest that your name is not Ben, I should be able to tell you are John. So tell me, those who are contesting government figures, what alternative figures are they providing? If we want to discuss the economy based on context, then we won't make progress. I am saying that as government, this is what various institutions of government have put together. We put it before Parliament. If another person has another figure, then they should be bold to put it before Parliament so we can discuss it. But the accounting of it has been done in the 2021 budget. I told you that we had a revenue shortfall of 11.6 billion in 2020. And then we had unbudgeted expenditure, which we couldn't do anything about. In law, they say it was a force majeure of about 13.6 billion. So there was a gap of 25.5 billion in 2020. Now, that gap was filled by all these COVID support that we are talking about, the loans we took from the World Bank, IMF supported us, ADB, Bank of Ghana, and all kinds. All these details have been provided in the 2021 budget in terms of how much was taken and how much or how every peswa or CD of that fund was also expended in terms of provision of PPE, medical equipment, vaccination, of course, the provision of water and electricity, and all the interventions government did. Remember, throughout the COVID year, no public worker, not even one public sector worker, was laid off, even though there was lockdown and people were home. Government continued to pay everybody. We sustained the economy, all the flagship programs of government, including free SHS, NAPCO, nursing training allowance, teacher training allowance, all of them, afforestation, you can think about it. They were all carried through the difficult year. So, yes, if somebody wants to know how those COVID expenditures were done, they are all been accounted for in Parliament. It was part of the budget that was presented to Parliament in 2021. And the details of those expenditures have been given to Parliament.
Of course, the 11, almost 12 billion Ghana CD end of year 2020 revenue shortfall. Yes, you make mention of some of those. But when you talk about, I am interested in the minutiae, the minute details when it comes to some of these figures. For example, I remember when the 50 plus million was spoken of in terms of procurement of PPE. Do you recall that?
Yes, I recall that.
Good. We weren't given specifics, the specifics that some of us in media and maybe generally would want about, details of the accurate numbers, which institutions got them, which people, where they were distributed to, that amounted to the 50 plus million. So do you get me now when I talk about...
No, I don't. Ben, I don't know who you spoke to. You know that COVID expenditures are done by the Ministry of Health. So tell me who in Ministry of Health you contacted. That didn't get
in terms of what?
In terms of what you are asking, the details you are looking for. Who did you talk to in Ministry of Health?
No, but you're referencing the budget, and that is exactly where I'm going back to. I'm not talking about the Ministry of Health.
Those information. The budget will give you the broader picture. So if you want to go beyond it to look for specifics, and then as a media, you talk to the ministry responsible for that.
Would it not have been maybe to keep things above the board to add those details, or is it that in a budget statement those are unnecessary because those are some of the very things circulating in the that people are asking questions
about? They are unnecessary. They are very necessary, but they are as part of the processes of reporting. There are different levels. Okay, so if the Ministry of Finance in its budget have to account for how every penny is spent by every ministry, we are going to have about maybe 100,000 pages of the budget. So what we do is to take summary of every ministry and how they are spent it. But the details fit to the ministry, and that is why audit service will subsequently go in to audit. You said you spent 10,000 on PPE. Where are the receipts? What were the processes of procurement? Who were in charge? So all those things are done, but there are different levels of accountability in the legal process. I don't know if you get the picture. So what you are asking for are available, but it means you have to engage the right institutions, the structure of governance, before you can get that information.
Right. So let's veer into other territory. I'll be getting shortly into the matter of the ratings we received in recent times and what your reaction is to some of those, because they also impact our finances as a country. But just to clarify with you, when Mr. Laporte, the World Bank country representative, says that we've secured some $430 million from the World Bank, that's what they've given to us. And instead of the 100 million that we've been talking about all of this while. Is that correct information coming from the World Bank country representative? Just to clarify with you.
But please, it's correct. But who said we've been talking about $100 million?
Well, we have even had some of your members of parliament come into the studio and they insist it's 100 million. So there's been that bit of a discrepancy about how much the World Bank has given
please,
up to this point. Even as of Honorable Kumar, even as of last week, if I recall, that was the story.
Oh no, it's not true. If you check the 2021 budget, and like I'm saying, sometimes World Bank continues to give us support. Yes, there was a specific $100 million for PPEs, but that's not the total expenditures on COVID. Then there was this, what I just explained to you, the 25 billion gap. One of the revenue sources we used was the support from the World Bank, the $450 million you are talking about. And it's been captured in the budget and accounted for on how it was expended. Okay, so it is not true that Ghana didn't account for it. Maybe we are talking about another $100 million for PPE, because I've seen that particular credit facility from the World Bank. But it does not mean that the COVID period we didn't get this 400 million. We got it, we announced it, we accounted for it in the 2021 budget. It was part of how we solved the 25 billion gap.
All right. So the 100 million, of course, part of the bigger figure, 430 million, which is the 2.58 billion Ghana cedi equivalent, all factoring into the 25 plus billion that we are talking about.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me come to Professor Lord Mensah before I come back to you, Honorable John
my
Kumar.
greetings to Prof.
All right. Prof, good morning. Is Professor Lord Mensah with us? All right.
So, yes, good morning, Ben.
Right, Prof. Thank you for joining. For a moment, I thought you had pulled a fast one on us.
Yeah, I was on mute. That's
right. Good to have you. So you've seen the figures, and so far we're talking about some 25 plus billion Ghana cedis that we've got on the back of COVID-19. And recently, like I was mentioning to Honorable Kumar, the World Bank clarifying that we've got some $430 million from them. When you look at all of what we have got so far on the back of COVID-19, the shocks to our system and what we've expended these on in terms of our budget, does it justify where we find ourselves economically now, looking at the nuancing we're getting in terms of even our credit ratings? In other words, have we spent these sums of money judiciously per where you sit?
Well, that's a very good question that every Ghanaian may want to know, want to have the answer to it. If you look at what is happening on the ground, remember when COVID came in, there was an economic dip. I mean, we saw kind of a stagnating economic activity, a situation where the agents within the economy, we're talking about, human flows, we're talking about businesses running around, even the government economic activities all got frozen. Now, if you look at this for about a month, that there was no movement within the economy. There was a dip. I remember at that time our GDP dropped to almost 2% thereabout. And so having been lifting the economy from that 2% to upwards, now we're talking about 4%. It tells you that we have spent, the money that that was earmarked for the recovery from this natural, situation of COVID. I can tell you that yes, we have spent. It could be that the people are not feeling it, and genuinely, that is why people are calling for where is the money and where did we spend it? Government may be spending, but the question is whether we're spending to hit, the sensitive part of the economy that will make people feel that spending. Very, very important. You should understand that most of the PPEs that are used in fighting this COVID are imported PPEs. And so, and how many people import, those PPEs? They are not, economic imports that are likely to create that kind of chains of economic activities within the country. If you are importing, vaccine, the vaccine comes straight and then it is injected to the people. So maybe from the airport straight to the hospitals, it will not create this kind of economic activity. So it is more or less money that has been received, but because a typical Ghanaian is into that kind of chain of production when it comes to vaccine production, we will not feel it as expected. But then it's money that has been spent. Let me also put this on record. When the COVID happened, I indicated that we shouldn't mix up the COVID spending with our national flow of spending. We had a situation where, we mixed it up. And like the Deputy Finance Minister is saying, John is saying, we should go into the budget. The budget is quite bulky. But having COVID as a special case, a situation that does not happen often, we shouldn't have mixed its spending and its inflows to the usual spending that we do. Because when it happens like that, you create that kind of a murky situation where people will find it difficult to appreciate your spending in relation to the flows that were coming in. So I was expecting that we would treat that kind of spending as a special one, have its own, special accounts, have its own inflows. So even as part of the budget readings, or as time goes on in the Kenyan interaction with the finance ministry, they will be releasing this, information at the website of the finance ministry, so that we can pick it up and say, okay, fine, this is how much came in, and this is how we have spent the money. But I'm telling you that, okay, fine, we may have spent those monies, but in the end, because Ghana, the Ghanaian economy is not structured to fit into that kind of COVID-related production, we may not feel it as expected. And, that is basically how it stands.
Right. Honorable Kumar, just a quick one, John Kumar, on what Prof is saying. Do you agree with him that the disaggregation in terms of COVID spending or COVID financing versus what exactly we've done in our budget, the disaggregation may not have been done in the sort of way that we should have, to ensure that we know exactly how much has gone into COVID and what exactly the gains have been along the way. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I agree with Prof to a large extent, except to say that the laws as crafted in our PFM Public Financial Management Act and our Constitution in terms of requirements for accountability to Parliament. Unfortunately, it may not envisage an issue of a pandemic and how you spend and how you account. So we are all boxed into one rule about how you have to go to Parliament within a specific period and then account for all revenues and expenditures that you have received. So, all revenues you have received and expenditures that you have made. But of course, like he rightly advised, you then have to specify on how much specifically was spent on COVID. And that is clearly provided in the budget. If you pick the 2021 budget, you can go on. In fact, it's even the last page of the budget to make it very easy for everybody. When you pick 2021 budget, go to the last page. You will find COVID expenditures. How much revenue came? Where did we get it from? How much was expended? In fact, out of the 25 billion that the GAP gave, we were able to raise, I think, 19.5 billion through the World Bank, ADB, IMF, and Bank of Ghana also gave the asset purchasing financing of 10 billion cedis. All of those ones are provided there. So you are able to know the various sources of funding and how it was done. But the deeper information, as Ben, you were requesting earlier, in terms of when you say you spent, let's say, 1 billion cedis on PPE, what were those PPEs and where did you purchase them from? Who were the suppliers? That one has to be received from a Ministry of Health. They will tell you the number of hospitals in Ghana, the various COVID centers they created, how much went where. And you know there was frontline health workers special incentives that were provided by government. If you want to see the beneficiaries of those who received the money, it will not be found in the budget. You have to go to Ministry of Health and apply for those specific information. Who are the doctors and nurses on our front line? Is it true that they received those support from government? And that kind of thing. We talked about secondary schools that are open at the time. They have to go back to school. So if Ministry of Education says that we supplied 100,000 of these nose masks or what do you call it, a liquid for hand sanitizer, I want to say hand sanitizer. They provided hand sanitizers and all kinds of things. So if you want the specific details in terms of quantity and specific cost, the Ministry of Finance, per our budgeting rules and laws, we cannot take those specific ones to Parliament. But of course, once we go to Parliament, the budget is referred to the various committees of Parliament. So the Health Committee, that is where the details will now come. And they will invite the minister, come and give us the specific details of how you said you spent this COVID money. You understand?
Right.
So all those accounting processes have been followed according to the provisions of the PFM Act and the Constitution and all other relevant financial laws of our land.
Right. Does that suffice for you, very briefly, Professor Lord Mensah, does that suffice for you in terms of explaining what we find in the budget?
Yeah, well, once the PFM will not allow that kind of separation, obviously there's nothing you can do about it. Yes, that seems to be, but you see, we spend. Well, the question is, we've been spending, and then when you go into the budget, you're going to see all those itemized things that we've spent on. But the question would be that, did we spend, in the areas that possibly we will say that they build up into the economy as expected? Effectively, probably that is why we're not seeing that kind of expenditure at the levels of the ordinary. And that is why Ghanaians are questioning maybe the inflows that came up recently from the World Bank report and all. They're asking whether indeed we spent those monies in the system or not. Clearly, I appreciate that. Of course, we're not part of the COVID-related chain of production. And so therefore, even if there's an expenditure, we may not feel it in the Ghanaian system. And that is why probably we're complaining that we've spent, but we don't see that spending in that regard.
Dr. Suming, let me bring you in at this point as we discuss two crucial issues that I want us to look at before we draw the curtains on the conversation. One has to do with tax exemptions. And recently, again, from the country representative of the World Bank, Pierre Laporte, he made mention of the fact that, one, we seem to be giving too many tax exemptions. And of course, we have our own shortfalls when it comes to tax collection, and all of that inimical to our economy. You would also want to pay attention to the fact that His Excellency, the President, in one of his State of the Nation addresses, did mention that we're facing a problem when it comes to the wide tax exemptions that we give, that in a period of 16 years, we could really see maybe even half of our GDP being given out in terms of these tax exemptions. So the cost of tax exemptions to our system, we want money to shore up the economy, yet we're giving out so much in terms of tax exemptions. How do you react to that?
Yes, I think, the issue about tax exemption has been with us for a long time. Actually, when we were under the IMF program, the last Extended Credit Facility program, it was a major topic for discussion. And, to be fair, this government seems to have made some attempts. I think the exemption bill has been laid in the past, and it is in the current budget, in the 2022 budget, there's been a promise that it's going to be relayed. So let us hope that indeed the exemptions bills are relayed, and there's a broader discussion about, who we are giving these exemptions to, and there's a comprehensive reform. We need to understand for every CD of exemption we're giving to any company, what we are getting in return. Not that, we just leave a lot of discretionary powers for our government officials to just grant exemptions. So I think, we've been told that the exemptions bill will be relayed, and we are all looking forward to it. And then see how much revenue we will get, because exemptions that we give, if we were to stop it, we raise more revenue than we raise in the e-levy that we are trying to introduce.
Right.
So it's good. The government has acknowledged that. The president has spoken about that. I'm just a little surprised about how long it has taken, given how long the discussion started. But let's see, maybe they are trying to be more extensive with the consultation and make sure that the coverage is as wide as it should be.
John, do you? I'm sure you don't disagree with what the World Bank country rep has said, but to what extent do you agree with him, and what can we do? He proposes, for example, that we should look at property tax. We have our property rates and what we're doing with them this year, but to what extent do you agree with him, and how do you think we can claw our way out of having so many of these big businesses going scot-free when it comes to tax waivers?
I totally agree with the World Bank rep and a representative, and of course with Dr. Mensah. And it's not only them, Parliament itself. I appear before the Finance Committee regularly, and I know the posture and concern of members of Parliament when it comes to tax exemption. And the good news is that the bill is now laid in Parliament. That is even in November of this last year. So hopefully we will see the end to the needless tax exemptions that always have to go out in terms of our negotiations with development partners and export credit facilities that come into our country. So yes, it's something we all agree that something has to be done about it, and steps are being taken to address or reduce substantially the issues of tax exemption.
Maybe to wrap the conversation, but before that, Prof, do you have a quick reaction to this before we get into the bit about the recent rating and wrap the conversation? Professor Mensah, I think you may have to unmute again.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Great, I can hear you.
Right. We need to look at these tax exemptions very well because when you give incentives or tax exemption, it's more or less deferring what the country is supposed to rake in immediately. But then as you defer it, you're thinking that, okay, given those exemptions, there could be that kind of chain of increase in economic production so that you benefit from that, direction. But you see, let me chip in this. It's unfortunate that we don't really have a special policy for this, tax exemptions. Because you give tax exemption purposely to rake in something in the future. And it's for a tenure. It's not a permanent thing that needs to be, that needs to be exploited. And then also, we also need to, move away from that kind of political promise of tax exemptions. Because when you tie tax exemptions to politics, it becomes difficult, to restore, the situation when, it comes to a point where it's not beneficial anymore. So for me, we need to relook at it and come up with a policy. So if we are giving tax exemptions to a particular company, why are we giving the tax exemption? What are we going to get in return in the next 4 years? So the tax exemptions will last for only 4 years. We need to look at all this and then come up with a strong policy in that direction.
Right. Gentlemen, let's just do this. I'll give you a minute each, just to be fair, to each one of you. It has to do with the recent ratings. We've heard from Standard & Poor's, and now Moody's has also come in, so to speak, to make the mood even worse. They are giving us a C rating. I'll start with you, John. I know government, had some interactions with Moody's, but it appears they did not look at the sovereigns on the African continent, how much COVID had affected our economies, and they still gave us a C. Your quick reaction to that?
Yes, but that is the hypocrisy of these rating agencies. Sometimes it's difficult to appreciate. We all know how COVID has negatively impacted virtually all economies. And you unfairly, still in the midst of COVID, in this pandemic, global pandemic, want to break people down to worsen their economic situation. Ghana particularly has rejected these ratings from Moody's. We have issued a statement. Just on 22nd January 2022, they appointed the lead Ghana analyst, Juan Veralusi, who has never even traveled to Ghana before. You sit before your desktop and look at documents and downgrade a country without even fiscally engaging the people.
Are you suggesting Moody's manufactured these figures, that they did not do the right due diligence?
The basis, we don't agree with the basis of those analyses. And we have made it plainly to them that, first of all, you cannot seek to downgrade a country in the midst of this pandemic when all your basis of this downgrade is that Ghana has overspent in COVID. I want to ask, which country in the world has not overspent because of COVID? Why are they not downgrading the European and American economy? It's just hypocritical, and I don't think we should give attention to this kind of negative propaganda against Africa.
Right. Okay. Thank you for succinctly addressing that. Prof. Mensah?
Yeah, Ben, I think the reaction from the government circles is quite unfortunate because these agencies don't change their models, right? The models they're using to create great companies, great sovereign entities like Ghana, across Africa, everywhere, remains the same. They don't change their gradings because it's COVID. The only difference is that the parameters that are feeding into the model they use have changed. So if you spend more, in COVID, and it gives you a future that indicates that you will struggle to pay your debt, it gives you a future that indicates that, COVID may have affected your production, so therefore you are not likely to pay your debt. Obviously you'll be downgraded. What we have to do is that we have to relate the downgrading of Ghana to other African countries and look at on the continent whether we've all been downgraded to a certain margin or not. Then we'll be able to appreciate what is happening on the ground. But I can tell you that the investor will not, understand an information that will come from, the government that is managing the economy, but rather they will rely on the information that these rating agencies gives them, because they've been relying on them to take their decision all this while. Why is it that the previous times when they were grading us, we never came out? And we should also understand that for these rating agencies, we call something solicited rating and then unsolicited, rating. What African countries do is what? Solicited. We hire them more or less because we want to get our information out there to the public, to the investment public, so that when we go to the market, the investor already has certain levels of information with us.
Right.
They've been grading all this while. So why at this time this reaction? I mean, for me, I will advise that the government does not go on to react to this grading, but rather accept it as a transition.
Okay.
Because it's unfortunate that we've not been in this C transition before. All this while, I think the minimum we've come to was B minus with a negative outlook. It's unfortunate, and we should understand that COVID is a natural disaster.
Right.
Every indicator on economies are going to change. It's
Right.
not going to be the same as we know. So it's an exceptional situation. We should just accept that and then get to know that it is a transition.
Okay.
And because it's a transition, when we put up very good measures, we may lift ourselves up from this situation.
Prof, thank you. Dr. Esuming, you get 1 minute as well. Hopefully you'll do a minute and then we can say goodbye to this discussion.
Yes. Well, I'm also quite surprised at the reaction of government to the ratings. Reading the report, I thought that the Moody's ratings was actually quite magnanimous to the government, because they said that they've kept our outlook as stable because of the government pre-pandemic track record of effective policies and effective policy management. So I'm quite surprised that the Deputy Finance Minister is at the reaction generally. But I mean, the substance of what is there, I don't think there's much to dispute in terms of how the fact that when we collect revenue, almost half is going to service interest. And the fact that, in the 2022 budget, we are going to rely more on domestic financing. The fact that it has the potential to crowd out the private sector. The fact that interest costs are going to go up because we are expecting that the interest rates are going to go up because the monetary policy rate will be expected to go up. It's already gone up in the last 3 months or so. And then around the world, we are all projecting that because inflation pressures are going up around the world, interest costs, many banks, central banks will raise their rates. So for me, I wasn't quite surprised at the downgrade. I expected that because the information that is being used to evaluate the economy is very similar. So I think maybe what we should do is to step up our effort to convince and show that we have a plan to bring the public finances back to where it should be, rather than trying to criticize the rating agencies. Because as my colleague said, when they rate us positively, we don't complain. And then when they rate us negatively, then we are criticizing them.
Thank you, gentlemen. And as I say goodbye to you, it's interesting. So Honorable John Kumar says nothing to write home about. Don't pay attention to what they are saying. They're being unfair. Dr. Esuming, you say you are even surprised it wasn't worse. And you see what Professor Mensah has been saying, that we shouldn't fight with them. We should take it in good faith. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Dr. Patrick Esuming, economist with the University of Ghana Business School, Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, and of course, Honorable John Kumar, Deputy Finance Minister. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. So we proceed from here to our very next big story, and it has to do with the e-travel card. We'll be bringing you details of that as we host Dr. Gideon Boakon, who is with the Office of the Vice President. He speaks on these matters, and he's going to be walking us through what exactly this means moving forward. That will happen right after the break. Please stay.